Representative Boyd, ready? Okay, Representative Boyd, you have 376. Thank you.
Ran up the stairs, so give me a minute to catch my
Okay.
breath.
Let her tell us about the bill first, and then we'll do the amendment. I don't see.
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I come to you today seeking favorable passage for HB 376, which seeks to extend and expedite protective coverage of domestic violence victims over weekends and holidays. The current statute reads, protective orders have to be filed by the next business day. Therefore, if an individual is assaulted or attacked on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, they will not have a much-needed layer of protection, not to mention if that Monday is a holiday. Then the victim is left with limited protection for nearly up to 4 days. HB 376 seeks to close this gap by mandating the order be filed by the next calendar day versus business day. Louisiana currently has the highest number of domestic violence claims and deaths in the United States. Domestic violence in Louisiana has grown considerably since the COVID-19 pandemic, deepening our crisis. The domestic violence has also increased significantly over holidays. The rising homicides have spiked the hotline calls from people seeking help, as well as an even increase in severity of injuries. While amending the current policy to from the next business day to the next calendar day is not an absolute cure, I hope we all agree it will provide the victims with an additional resource, a protection that includes weekends and holidays. I thank you for your consideration.
Okay. Who do you have there at the table with you?
Mr. Tyrell Morris, if you will identify yourself, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyrell Morris. I'm the Executive Director of the Orleans Parish Communication District, which is home of New Orleans 911, and also the Chairman of the recently created Violence Crime Reduction Task Force for the City of New Orleans.
Okay. Did you fill out one of these cards?
I believe my staff did, yes.
Okay. I'm not seeing it, but that's okay. Okay. Also filling out cards in support wishing to speak is Roxanne Welch. Miss Welch, you want to come on up? And we have Miss Patty Freeman.
She stepped out, but she's on her way back in.
Okay. As soon as she comes in, if we get her to the table.
Okay, thank
All right,
you.
Miss Welch, get 3 minutes.
My name is Roxanne Welch. I'm the director of the Family and Youth Service Center here in Baton Rouge. We have a lot of different agencies. There are 23 agencies there on our site, but one of the agencies is the Capital Family Justice Center. It deals with domestic violence. I spend a lot of time there at my center because it's a big place with a lot of things that's going on. And I was there this past Saturday. And a lady came and I happened to be near my office, and she needed to come in because she was told to come to our center to get a protective order. Well, it was a Saturday. And I let her in. Naturally, I was there. She had just been released from the hospital. She had surgery that went from her bra line all the way down below her belt line, and she was terrified because she has no one in this life. And the perpetrator, they had put her in the hospital by hitting her in the stomach so hard it dissected part of her bowel, was out. And she thought she could get a protective order. Well, it was a Saturday. And truthfully, I run the center, and I work with the Capital Area Family Justice Center, but I didn't realize how difficult it is to get a protective order. at times it's almost, there are times it's impossible. You have to wait. And so my center is completely surrounded by a gate. I have a state trooper that lives there. I have a BRPD officer that lives there. And then there was me. And she was terrified of leaving. And she asked me if there was any place that she could go. Well, she wasn't really domestic violence and didn't want to file domestic violence charges. She was so afraid. And strangely enough, she was terrified of costing him his job. She just wanted a place that was safe. And she debated whether or not she wanted a protective order or not because she was afraid that was only going to make him angrier. But she was ready. She was ready. And she couldn't do it because it was a Saturday. Now, this isn't going to fix a Saturday, but it'll fix a Friday. And so I'm asking you to please understand that it's hard enough, and to place more burdens and to place more obstacles in the way of people who suffer through this. It's not what we're here for.
Thank you, ma'am.
I appreciate it.
Resident Muscarelli, your questions for the author?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Action Chairman. How are we going to, is there a fiscal note associated with this? Have you had anybody looking at that?
I have been working with the Clerks Association trying to make sure that we can come up with something that is reasonable for everyone here. In my mind, the initial bill, if you notice before the amendment, I had 2 hours because I'm thinking everyone has access to a cell phone, so you can have a clerk on call, just as we have duty judges. Everyone has access to some type of electronic device. We all know how to maneuver through it because we all survived COVID-19 working remotely. I do recognize that even having someone on call may affect the Clerks Association, but I do believe that we can come to some type of resolution to have these victims protected for over nearly 4 days in some instances. So I am willing to work with them between now and the floor to see if we can work out with that. But I do believe we need to have some type of recourse that they have where they can have some type of protection if they are assaulted on a Friday or a Saturday or even a Sunday. And God forbid if that Monday is like a Labor Day holiday.
Well, this is my wheelhouse. I'm an attorney. And so, there's a Gwynn's Law, which basically keeps the perpetrator in jail for 5 days after a domestic. Or were you aware of that provision of the law?
If he's arrested, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I understand, but I just think there are protections afforded that, and I don't know how we're going to institute this. I don't know how this looks with the clerk of courts.
It looks the same way it looks right now. Right now, if the order is issued, it has to be completed and filed by the next business day. All we're doing is saying make it the next calendar day and not the next business day. If they're arrested, then we're fine. Because you do have that, some places, I think it's 3 days, some places it's 5. What if they're not arrested? This protective order helps this victim be able to identify with other people that she has a protective order or he has a protective order against the accuser.
Well, and so my other concern is how are you going to get the perpetrator served on a weekend? Can you answer to that question?
Sure. So I can give real life examples. When 911 calls come in, individuals go to the clerk to get the judge to get a protection order issued, and it's issued on a Friday, but the suspect has not been served. The FBI provides a process for that, but the reality is when the victim calls 911 to report the person is now in their vicinity, we dispatch a police officer to the scene. The protection order has not been entered into the registry or into the National Protection Order file, so there's no evidence for an officer to intervene or to serve the protection order at that time because the system does not know it exists. So if it's in the system, the officer at the time of interface can then at that time serve the protection order, give the instruction, update the record, so there's another interaction, then that person can be charged with violating the protection order.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Representative Landry.
Thanks, Rep. Boyd and our OPD director for being here. I like, as you pointed out, there's always a duty judge because emergencies happen. Yes. The whole people getting arrested over Mardi Gras story. But if there's a duty judge, there can be a duty employee clerk. Lord knows in certain areas we have many many employees in clerks' offices. But I just wanted to ask you, I've helped file these before, and I know you're familiar with people who filed them. Generally, someone who files this, they've been pushed to an edge, or the situation is very volatile.
Absolutely.
And so time is of the essence. Yes. And to your point, I want to call you Tyrell, sorry. About service, there's different protective orders, but I remember one I filed that it took the sheriff's office a while to serve it, which is generally the case with everything in CDC. And so I didn't even realize, to your point, that the law enforcement officer could do that at the time, which is even better situation, for service, not for the person. And again, there's the national databases for all of this, and no one knows about it if it's not put in there. And so thank you for bringing this, and if I can help you in any way, I will. And I would like it to be a shorter amount of time, but I understand people need to get used to the process.
Right.
Thank you.
Representative Gaines.
Yeah, and I commend you, Rep. Boyd, on pursuing this issue and taking on this commendable cause. But that was my concern, whether or not the infrastructure was in place, even if we pass this bill, whether or not it can be adapted to make this work. I mean, is it doable? That was basically my question.
I think, and I'm sure that Director Morris can also attest to this. We are now post-COVID, where we were all forced to find some type of way to work remotely. So it may not be ironclad right now. We would have to work through that. And that's my attempt with the Clerks Association to see how we can come to something that is amenable, which is why I had no problem changing the 2-hour window to the next calendar day to try to make it more accessible and easier for them to adapt to this new program. But I also wanted to mention a story right here in Baton Rouge in December of last year, where the domestic violence victim was actually, her attacker came back through that weekend and murdered her right here last December, not even 6 months ago. So the cases are here, they're real. We need to address it. We all have some type of resistance to change, I get that, but in a case like this, we want to try to do everything that we can to add a layer of protection for victims.
Representative Edmondson.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Representative Boyd, so it's my understanding you haven't had an opportunity to talk to the clerks about this bill.
We have.
Oh, you have?
We have been
Okay.
conversing back and forth, trying to come up with some language. I have agreed with Debbie that we will continue to work moving forward to the floor to see how we can come to some type of resolution on how to get this gap closed somehow. From it being a possible 3 to 4 days to the shortest time possible. And she and I are going to work. She and I have been working very well on a couple of bills.
Okay. Could we get somebody from the clerks of court to just come?
Ms. Huddle did fill out a card. We're going to call her up.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Boyd. I think this is absolutely necessary. I think there's a lot that goes on that we don't know.
Absolutely.
And I think women absolutely need to be protected. And I think the next day is essential.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing
it's huge
the
that
bill.
Right now we're leading the United States in domestic
I
violence
realize
claims.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Representative Presley, have a question for the author?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Representative Boyd, I appreciate you bringing this bill. I think it's vitally important, and I think yet again it highlights the need for transforming our technology within our court system, which is something that we have had. I know Representative McGee was here earlier and has brought bills on that. I brought a bill on that. It's something that's been highlighted not only in this session,
yes.
but this term
yes.
and the term before.
Yes.
And I am very optimistic that legislation like this, that's so important to the people of Louisiana, will become law, and that our court system will finally come up to date on technology.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing
yes.
it.
Thank you.
I just want to give the committee additional piece of information around infrastructure and technology. It made sense when the protection order registry was created, because at that time, the national database for protection orders that's maintained by the National Criminal Information Center, regulated by the FBI, was very restrictive in what protection orders can and cannot be entered into the national registry. Those barriers have been removed. So now you can enter almost all types of protection orders into the National Registry, and that's the standard best practice now, that we standardize and using the national standards. Louisiana has not quite gotten there yet. So this bill will align us with the best practices and ensure that we're using all databases, because the existing system today, and we're very connected to Louisiana, but when we don't use a national database, a lot of our victims flee to neighboring states, Texas and Mississippi, Alabama, and when their attackers follow them and they engage law enforcement in that state, they have no idea that a protection order has been issued. This would close that loophole to ensure that all law enforcement agencies across the nation would have an idea that this individual has been ordered to be protected by a judge.
Ms. Freeman, would you tell us who you are? And
I'm Patty Freeman, the Executive Director at the Iris Domestic Violence Center. Our main headquarters organizational property is here in Baton Rouge, but we serve 8 parishes. I'm also a 28-and-a-half-year veteran of the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, where I specialized in domestic violence investigations and supervised an investigatory unit there. We see victims daily who come in and, through our services, apply for protective orders with the aid of my organization, IRIS. They are living in shelter in fear and terror that their abuser will find them. I, through law enforcement, have also seen delays where they have applied for protective orders and the abuser seeks them out, finds them, and when an officer arrives, he can't verify a protective order is in place. The flip side to that is what the state trooper acknowledges, that when they seek a verification of a protective order and find it, they can then serve that offender on site. Beyond that, what that gives that police officer, and I have experience there as well, is the ability to pass on to the next shift or to be watchful during their own shift for that offender who has already sought out that victim once, has now been served by that officer who responded, and now they have knowledge specific that the offender has been served, and because law mandates an arrest where a violation of protective order and probable cause exists, that they arrest them immediately. This would give the ability for them to have that information a lot more quickly, for there to be less delays, for that victim not to live in fear and terror until these processes are completed. It doesn't hurt any agency. It seeks to only help those victims with their children who have lived in absolute terror, some of which I've seen through my law enforcement experience, and those that we see daily coming through our doors at IRIS. Our legal department specifically represents victims within the courts for protective orders solely. So we see this on a daily basis, the fight and the struggle and the terror that they endure until this process is complete, because the piece of paper doesn't per se protect them, but the ability of the police and law enforcement to take immediate action once it has gone through the processes is what they're relying and waiting on.
thank you, Ms. Freeman. Okay, if we call up to the table Ms. Steer with Louisiana Protective Order Registry. Y'all could yield the table. We're going to take up some people wanting us to speak for information. Brian Wiggins from Louisiana Supreme Court, and Debbie Huddle with Louisiana Clerks Association.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I'm Brian Wiggins from the Louisiana Supreme Court. We administer the Louisiana Protective Order Registry. The director, Ramona Harris, really wanted to be here. She has been the director for 11 years. She cares very passionately about this issue, and she couldn't make it. We work very closely with our partner agencies, including the Clerks of Court, to ensure that law enforcement nationwide has access to protective orders. In Louisiana, the protective order is very expansive, spans very different areas of law, including the civil law, criminal law, and the children's code. I just have a couple of brief points, just technical points, and substantive law for the committee's consideration when considering this instrument. First, a protective order is effective upon the signature of the judge. It does not have to be entered into a registry in order to be effective. That is an important part of the process, no doubt. But it is effective upon the signature of the judge. Secondly, the protective order registry exists in order to provide a centralized repository for all orders on a state and nationwide basis. There's an entire process that Ann Steer, who is here also, one of the creators of LPOR, developed in order to make sure that the information entered is accurate and valid. That includes checking the names that are correct to prevent mistaken identification, checking errors on the orders, cross-checking it against databases. So there's a lot of training and effort that goes into making sure that the orders are accurate. And in that way, that's the reason why it is a centralized repository. We have to make sure that the orders are valid and accurate. Finally, there's some areas of existing law to consider. One is a copy of the order should always be given to the protectant. That should always be done. Secondly, in existing law, the chief law enforcement agency for the parish should have a copy of the order, and that should be indexed. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, there is existing law to prevent individuals who are extraordinarily dangerous from getting out of jail. It's called Gwynn's Law. It passed a few years ago, and it's Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 313. And I just want to end with saying that we want to make sure that the victims are protected. We're willing and able to provide technical assistance to any courts, but our analysis have shown that it's one section of one court that is filing orders on weekends and holidays, and that's in Orleans Parish. So this is a statewide law that would affect every state, every clerk of court, but we can certainly be willing to work with this court to make sure that their orders are enforced and protected. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Steer, 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Ann Steer. I've worked in the domestic violence field for a little over 40 years. I'm a former victim of domestic violence. I've dedicated my social work career and my law career in helping victims and representing victims in protective order proceedings. I want to thank Representative Boyd for bringing this issue before this body. She has great passion for this work, and we are very appreciative of her. I also want to thank the representatives from the domestic violence programs. I was a former director of the Baton Rouge program, so it's nice to see one of my successors. But, you know, this bill is very narrowly tailored in a way. The Domestic Abuse Assistance Act in Title 46 was passed by this legislature in 1982, and all of the people who had a part in the process worked together to establish timeframes. Certainly, we all wish that these orders could end up in the hands of victims, in the hands of law enforcement, and certainly in NCIC through the registry as quickly as possible. And I think if we all got together, we could figure out a way to make that happen. But one of the major, I guess, problems with this particular bill as it's written now is it only addresses protective orders issued under Title 46. Y'all may know that we have a Domestic Abuse Assistance Act in the revised statutes, which is being affected by this bill. We also have a similar Domestic Abuse Assistance Act in the Children's Code. And as some people have mentioned, we also have what's called protective orders as bail restrictions or Gwynn's Law proceedings, sentencing orders, and probation conditions. So this bill only affects a protective order that's issued under Title 46. It does not affect the temporary restraining order that is just as important to be served, because that's the initiating order that then, once a defendant is served, gives rise to his opportunity, and I say his and I apologize, the respondent's opportunity to come to court and for the judge to decide whether a protective order will be issued. So I think it's important that if we're going to address the timeliness of orders of protection getting to the registry and ultimately to NCIC, we need to be broader. We need to make sure that we change all the laws in Louisiana that give rise to these orders of protection. We've been using the term protective order, but as I mentioned, in Louisiana, protective order is an order issued after notice and an opportunity for a hearing under Title 46's revised statute,
Few more
under
seconds.
the Children's Code, and under the Code of Criminal Procedure.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hudnall, 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Debbie Hudnall, Executive Director of the Louisiana Clerks Association. I, too, appreciate what Representative Boyd is trying to do here, and I have been working with her. And I have worked on this over the last many years, and as I've told Representative Boyd, I'm very attuned to this because my one and only child has been subjected to domestic violence, so I'm very attuned to this. The Louisiana Clerks of Courts, of all 64 parishes, they are the only office that I know of where their hours are set by state statute, and that has a lot to do with other legal matters like prescription. So their hours are set from 8:30 to 4:30. And when we did this bill numerous years ago, that's why we said that it would be done expeditiously as possible, but no later than the next business day. Because if it is done on a Friday and it cannot be processed that Saturday, and for us to have someone on duty 24 hours, this would be a huge fiscal note on this bill. So I'm certainly working with Representative Boyd and glad to do that. But that's why through the years we worked on this to say expeditiously as possible, but no later than the next business day. Because if it happens on a day, then the next day is a holiday, that would require the clerks to have staff on hand, and that would be additional cost for the clerks.
Would it help you guys if we amended to change the shall language to may? Would you think it would be a little more palatable? Like the clerks may develop a policy and procedure instead of shall. That would give the opportunity for Orleans to do it, and if one of our rural parishes just weren't just really up to speed to do that yet, they would give them the option where they wouldn't be technically be liable if they couldn't do it. Would that help? Would that help the bill? I guess is my question.
Well, you're talking about Section G, line 18.
Yeah.
I mean, that certainly would assist us. You know, a part of the issue that we have, I think, is entering protective orders is not like applying for a credit card.
Oh, I get it.
We have a limited scope of people that are doing this, and so
you got to clock it in. You got to file it. You got to find the judge.
It takes a lot of training to do it right. It's cross training. It's what have you, and we've really worked hard to perfect that. Now it needs help. You know, there's definitely things that we can work on with Orleans in particular, and we're happy to help technical assistance, whatever training that they need, but. I think there is still an issue with authorized agencies in that line.
And as Representative Presley mentioned, the clerks have gone a lot to electronic filing, and even I think in his parish, in Bossier Parish, the clerk speaks how she has filed a petition electronically for a protective order and sent it electronically to the judge and was signed and processed within 45 minutes. So we're doing that, and as he said, that maybe, I think it's only New Orleans right now that they're having night court where the judges are doing those, and they're not doing it in the other 63 parishes.
It would help. Representative Musgrove, did you still have a question?
Just to clarify your point, ma'am, it's not really a protective order. It's a temporary restraining order. It doesn't go into the database until after a hearing is had and there's testimony, and then it becomes a protective order, correct?
Well, partly correct. The bill only...
Well, did you answer this question? If a order is issued 2 days later, after the... Joe, can you move over a little bit?
Thank you.
If an incident happens on Saturday, they issue the order. That doesn't go into the database, does it?
I'm sorry.
If we're
talking
interim
about a
order.
criminal order of protection?
No, I'm talking about the civil, which is Because she's saying that this won't apply to criminal. I understand criminal. I'm talking about civil,
Okay.
which this bill addresses.
All right.
If an incident happens Saturday morning, they file a temporary restraining order under the protective order statute. There is no database that it goes to.
Well,
Yes or no?
the process is a petition for a protective order has
Right.
to be filed with the clerk of court.
But it doesn't go into the database.
Well, the petition doesn't go into the database.
Right. Because
no.
it's a temporary restraining order.
If the court issues a temporary restraining order by law, that temporary restraining order has to be filed by the judge with the clerk's office. Then the clerk's office has a time delay where they have to transmit the order to the sheriff's department of the parish where the protected person resides and to the protective order registry.
Okay, so the initial order would go to the FBI registry.
The Louisiana Protective Order Registry is a repository of Louisiana orders. It is designated by the state police as the entity that can transmit orders of protection to NCIC.
Yeah, but you have to have a hearing first, correct?
No, sir. No, sir. No,
In short, we send the temporary restraining order to the LPOR.
Right, but they
and
can
to the sheriff.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong. They can still have a handgun. They can still.
Well, may I just take a moment?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be
Okay.
quick because I know everybody's in a hurry. But,
I understand.
And I'm going to vote for the bill because
And
but I
us
do
too.
think it needs some work.
Okay. Well, I do agree that it needs some work. But a victim can file a petition for a protective order. In that petition, they're requesting an immediate temporary restraining order.
Correct.
And they're also asking for a hearing to be set on their request for a protective order. So temporary restraining orders and protective orders are different legal animals,
I
as
agree.
you well know.
That's what I'm
Okay.
trying to get to.
Okay. So both of which require that copies be sent to the clerk's office by the judge and then sent to the clerk's office has to send them to a myriad of people. One of which is the Louisiana Protective Order Registry.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Muscarella. Representative Jordan, you waive your question. Okay. Thank you. Thank y'all for coming to the table. Also filling out cards of support is Aura Randolph, Jeff Davis, CADA, Cynthia Perry, JDCADA, Lisa Guidry, JDCADA, Hunter Duke, IRIS, Domestic Violence Center, Esther Devonaglam, LWG, Africa Arsenault, Faith House, Sonia Johnson, Faith House, Tracy Frentz, herself, Bill Lacombe, Faith House, Tiffany Decay, Faith House, Julie Harris, herself, Alicia Bro, just 10,000 Women, Allison Zimmer, here for herself, Deborah Arcus, 10,000 Women, Mickey Mickle, Women on Wednesday, Amanda Anderson, Reproductive Freedom Acadiana, Mary Ann Mushat, 10,000 Women, T. Moore, 10,000 Women, Lisa Rustinai, 10,000 Women, Lori Calais, 10,000 Women, Melissa Florney, I guess her, 10,000 Women, Jasmine Kemp, Washington Parish, Rachel Colonna, Self, Kyra Spikes, WOW, Sandra Farron, WOW, Laura Denopoulos, Self, Cody Cooper, I guess the Self, Joan Simon, Self, Debbie McLeod, Washington Parish, Dims, Lynette Majaya, herself, Kate Covington, 10,000 Women, Hannah Duke, Iris Domestic Violence Center, Ann Ritchie, Iris Domestic Violence Center, Courtney, is it Brousseau? Herself, Susan Wishar, Jesuit, and Social Research. I'm having a hard time. Justice. Ryan Haney, OPCD. Pamela Allison, United Way of Southeast Louisiana. Charmaine Cassiopa, United Way of Southeast Louisiana. Tina Cavas, SAE, Safe Harbor. Lori Brignac, Safe Harbor. Christy Giammalia, Southeast Advocates for Family Empowerment. Kimberly Kirby, Safe Harbor. Summer Hartman, Southeast Advocates for Family Empowerment. Peter Robbins, Louisiana Progress Action. Michael Cahoon, The Promise of Justice Initiative. Kathy Hunter Lowry, Louisiana Survivors for Reform. Natalie Sharp, Louisiana Survivors for Reform. Amy Cord, Catholic Diocese of Baton Rouge. Alexis Smith, Project Celebration Inc. Allison Godfrey, Project Celebration Inc. Mitz Harris, Project Celebration. Kathy Manuel, Oasis A South Haven. Tahara Johnson, Oasis A South Haven, Safe Haven. Fern Carr, Archdiocese New Orleans. Dana Lambert, I guess for herself. Frank DeFilco, Louisiana Supreme Court. Are you here, Mr. Filco? You wave? You good? Okay. Tom Costanza, Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. Danny Laura, representing himself, and former state representative Jared Broussard, who is my good friend. Good to see you, Rep. Good to be back. Okay, Representative Boyd. Representative Boyd, let me ask you, would you consider between here and the floor maybe some conversations about a pilot program, maybe for Orleans, and that way it could. My concern is, and look, I'm voting for you, Bill. I just think between here and the floor, I think we're going to get a call from a lot of clerk of courts that's going to.
Sure, Mr. Chair, and I'm open to conversation regarding anything with making the bill better to protect our victims. I think what I'm hearing is a lot of it's change, it's different for a lot of people moving forward with this bill the way that it is. But that's what happens in our society, and that's what we're here to do, to create new policy, to change laws, to create things that will help protect our citizens. At some point, we had to come up and develop the idea for the next business day and implement that. I'm just looking to implement something that will cover victims through the weekend, and I'm definitely open to conversation on how to make that happen, what is the easiest process to make that happen, to make them safer.
We're going to do our best to work with you. Representative Hughes?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to publicly thank you, Representative Boyd. You've been a leader on domestic violence issues prior to even coming to the legislature, and certainly you've been a strong voice once you arrived. And Director Morris, thank you for your leadership. Appreciate your commitment. I know you will continue to work with all stakeholders as this continues to advance. And so, Vice Chair, I'd like to move favorable.
Let me do it. And look, we need to do an amendment to the bill to put it in its proper posture. I'll offer the amendment, and Ms. Lewis will tell us what it's about. I think you've already alluded to it, but we need to go ahead and put it in the record.
Yes, sir. There's just one set of amendments on this bill, set number 2178, which has been posted online, distributed to the members. In this set of amendments, we are just removing the requirement the clerk of court transmit the protective order by fax to the Judicial Administrator's office and change the 2-hour filing requirement to the end of the next calendar day.
Okay, I'll offer the amendment. Any objection? So being the amendment is adopted. Do we have a motion? You guys, Representative Presley has made a motion to report HB 376 as amended. Any opposition? With our none, we'll talk what we're doing here in the floor. Bill reported favorable. As amended.
Thank you.